Hello and welcome. Today we're talking about scholarships and how they really work in Australia. My name is Rena and I'm joined today by Laurie and George here from Sofiri. Welcome to you both. We're so pleased to have you live with us today. Can you both tell us a bit about yourselves?
Hi, thank you, Rena. Thank you for having us today.
Of course.
My name's Laurie, and as I work with Safiri, so I came on board as an education expert, but recently took on the role as the National Manager, Student Experts and Partnerships. So I'm very much across the process of assisting students to choose a course of study. But my background, I've worked in international education for the past 15 years, almost 16 years. So I have sort of a lot of first-hand insight into education providers and the type of scholarships that they offer. So I hope to bring that expertise to the webinar today.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Hi, Rina. Thank you so much for organizing today's. And yes, I also work with Safiri, and I can bring into today's conversation close to 8 years of experience in the international education industry, working with universities and providers in Australia and other parts of the world as well.
Wonderful. Thank you both again for joining us here today. So I'm excited about today's conversation because we're talking about the realistic opportunities that are out here in Australia for you to get a scholarship to study at university or college. So as Laurie and George mentioned, we're tapping into many years of experience in international education and in helping international students enrol in Australian universities and colleges. So I'll talk a little bit about the agenda for our session today so you know what to expect. But we're going to begin about having a little chat about how scholarships in Australia really work. And then we're going to open up to a question and answers segment where we'll take any question you have about scholarships for Laurie and for George. And we'll wrap up the session with a screen share where we'll talk through how you can find out more about commencing a program in Australia if that's something you're looking to do. So if you've joined any of our live sessions over the last 2 weeks, you'll know the drill by now. So pop in an emoji or a comment on Facebook, or if you've joined us on our webinar, to let us know you're here. And shoot us any questions that come to mind throughout the session and we'll answer them as we go. Okay, so Laurie and George, I have my first question here for you, and that's around what type of scholarships are available in Australia. Could you answer that for us, Laurie?
Sure. So in Australia, there are a range of scholarships available for international students. They range from full scholarships, of which there are probably the lesser of the scholarships, partial scholarships, also things like accommodation, scholarships, bursaries, but also scholarships in Australia can be quite targeted as well. So it might be the case that they're nationality specific or discipline specific.
Yeah.
So if somebody is interested in a particular program or course, it might be an area, for example, where Australia really wants to develop its expertise and capability. So they might invest in those particular course areas. So I think there are scholarships available, but they do range and vary from provider to provider as well.
Okay, great. George?
There are some that are government funded as well as provider funded. So I think there are some third-party organizations as well that offer scholarships. Probably the one thing to highlight is that the number of full scholarships is way more limited than the number of partial scholarships.
Okay, sure.
And I guess I was going to say, coming back to that, so I guess essentially there are 3 types of scholarships, as George mentioned. So there's ones that the federal government provides, which we can talk a little bit more in a minute. The second is through education providers, so through universities and vocational providers and elder course providers. And then the third is through private organisations. Okay. So yeah, they're the different types of, that's sort of like the 3 categories that you could categorise them into.
Okay, great. Well, let's talk about full scholarships for a minute because we know that's something that we're all very interested in. It's the holy grail of scholarships. Can you tell us a little bit more about what a full scholarship means and how we would get one?
So I guess a full scholarship is the bells and whistles. It's probably what everybody is aspiring to, potentially if they're looking for support with funding their education overseas.
Mm-hmm.
I think very realistically, as George mentioned, full scholarships are few and far between.
Yeah.
It's something that I guess as an international student, they need to be realistic about thinking through that ability to get a full scholarship.
Yeah.
It really is for the perfect grade A student.
Uh-huh.
But it might not even just be about grades, it might be about other things as well. So, things that they've done in their community, volunteer work they've done. It might not necessarily just be academic, but it is certainly for somebody who is, just incredible. But that is not to say that there aren't other scholarships available, of course. And I think probably our time today is better spent talking about partial types of scholarships which students can access.
Okay.
Because there are a lot of those. But I guess just to take it back, there's around about 3,000 scholarships available each year to Australian students, so to domestic students. So we do know that the proportion of scholarships available to international students is lesser than that.
Yeah.
So I think, there is an opportunity, and we might not necessarily be talking about scholarships specifically. We might be talking about specials or discounts.
Yeah.
So sometimes providers will have, particularly in the ELICOS, the English language programs in Australia, they might offer a special to particular countries and students. So that's also something to think about.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's talk about partial scholarships for a moment then, and what they really mean. Because when I think of a partial scholarship, I think of a fee discount. But you just mentioned a couple of other different types of scholarships that you might put under the name bursaries or partial scholarships as well. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. So a partial scholarship is ordinarily, so obviously when students are coming to study in Australia, they're looking at either, an undergrad, a postgraduate course, a vocational course, or an ELICOS program.
Yeah.
So all of those different study options potentially have the ability to offer a discount or a scholarship. But because it's a very, I can't actually say to you, well, this is exactly what this university will provide, or this is what this vocational college will provide.
Yeah.
Because it can change, but it's also very complex. There's also lots of very different scholarships available. And I think, for example, there might be a vocational provider that offers a specific discount on a program if they enroll.
Yeah.
There might be universities that have a particular scholarship available, but it might be something like, $5,000 or, it's not going to be the whole, obviously, full scholarship. I did a search myself yesterday, just randomly, and pretended I was a student from Columbia.
Okay.
And with a well-known Australian university. And I think I was a Columbian student who wanted to study business, a Bachelor of Business. And so the search results presented, probably 5 different options. And I think that's kind of the overwhelm, that there's these options there for you, but how do I actually go about navigating that process?
Yeah.
And how do I go applying for that? And that's where Safiri can assist students to navigate that process and to find scholarships that potentially could assist that student.
Okay.
But I think it is like when he said, well, are partial scholarships available? And as I said, it might be $2,000 off a course. It might be $5,000 off a course. But I think there's so many options out there that it's more the overwhelm in navigating that process that's difficult.
Okay.
Not necessarily just to add up to the subject of partial scholarships, but I just realized that there were another type of full scholarship that we forgot to mention, and that is the host country government offering scholarships. So again, as an example, the LPDP in Indonesia. So the government of Indonesia wanting their students to go and excel overseas, and they usually limited to postgraduate only, so not available to undergrad, but the ability to have a full scholarship, but in this case, it's actually paid by the government of the host country, and the student will need to do everything, the whole process with their government. So that's another type of full scholarship that may change from country to country. Some are obviously better in terms of the number of scholarships they offer. Some are very limited. But usually the role is that it's postgrad, both a coursework or research. But back to the partial scholarships, and as Laurie mentioned, that are more common, the ones that I have seen across the board tend to be partial scholarships that apply to the first year fees, that range between $5,000 to $10,000 of the first year fees. So if you were to do, say, a master's degree, and the cost of that year is $25,000 or $30,000, let's say, and then you get a $10,000 scholarship, that means that your fee will be reduced $20,000. Now, there are some providers that are even better than that. So I think if you check out on other sessions that we held over the last couple of weeks, there was one with the University of Tasmania. The scholarships are up to 25% of the total fee, but they also not limit themselves to the first year, but the whole duration.
Okay.
So that means that if you're gonna apply for an undergrad degree or a postgrad degree, and then again you're paying about say $20,000 per year, then is $5,000 that you will not need to pay. So we'll reduce it down to 15 as an example. Now, one of the conditions for you to be able to get one of those scholarships is that you need to keep a really high GPA throughout the duration. So you may lose it if you don't. So you may be awarded with that, but you need to make sure that you provide really good results, that you don't ever fail a subject and things like that.
Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about that again a little bit in a moment. But I just wanted to ask a question that was following on from what Laurie was saying earlier about how to find out about the different types of scholarships and how it can get a bit complex. We know we can use Soferi, and we'll show everyone who's watching how to use Soferi, how easy that is in a moment. But say I prefer to do my own research as to what scholarships I can find in Australia, whether they're full scholarships or partial scholarships, all these other different types of scholarships. How would I start doing my own research?
So I think essentially, bring it back as well, I didn't mention, so I talked about the Australian government scholarships. So there are two in particular which I would mention. There's one called the Australia Awards Scholarship, and there's also one called the Endeavour Awards Scholarships and Fellowships.
Okay.
They're two government-funded scholarships that are available. Something like that, for example, it's an online application process, and it's, it requires a lot of research to submit that application. Obviously, they're very few and far between, so very competitive to apply for those. So I just wanted to mention those. They are available, and they are ones which students can apply for. It's ordinarily somewhere perhaps that Australia has partnerships internationally where they're keen to, to sort of enhance that partnership with a particular country.
Okay.
So it's definitely something. So that's the Australia Awards Scholarships and the Endeavour Scholarships, which you can Google and have a look at.
Okay.
In terms of looking at other providers, as I mentioned before, I went on yesterday as a pretend international student from Colombia, and I looked at a couple of universities just to see what was available. And really that's the key way to have a look. It's looking at university websites to see what is available. And I know, universities have a lot of information on there, but I think it is then navigating that process and understanding that process.
Yeah.
It is overwhelming, and there's a lot of information to get through. But essentially that's the best way. So through the universities, through the vocational providers, and then through the government website as well, the Australian government website.
I just wanted to add to the opportunities available through the Australia Awards and the Endeavour Awards that all the criteria is defined on their website. So the government obviously has very well-known websites where to establish everything. But usually they have like very specific, strict deadlines as to when you can apply. Number one. Number two, you want to get an unconditional offer from an education provider, so from a university first, before you were to even apply for the scholarship. So that's a different thing, you know, like you don't apply for the scholarship first to then apply for the provider. No, it's the other way around. And sorry, maybe conditional, you know, if you were to meet English, but you still need to do the IELTS. And then be able to obviously get it until you meet the conditions. But what I most importantly wanted to say is that from the experience that I have and what I've seen for some of the applicants for these type of awards is that it does require someone special for sure. So not only again just your GPA being perfect, because it's not even in you have a 4.8 out of 5. That's the people that will be competing for these scholarships have perfect GPAs. It's also the work experience and what they have attempted to do within their communities and how they want to implement what they study in Australia back in their home countries. So, you know, writing all these statements as to why you should be awarded one of this is a highly complex process, and but it's extremely competitive. So if you definitely are that kind of person, by all means, you should be pursuing that. But if you, for instance, you know, say, oh, I have a 4.5 out of 5 on my undergrad, that already tells you that even if you meet that requirement, which is the minimum they ask, it's so competitive that most likely will not be the case. But that's the point of all these partial scholarships, because you probably will be deserving of a partial scholarship, right?
Yeah. Great. Well, look, so very clear, the answer is very clear then, that we're not recommending necessarily that everyone be drawn towards full scholarships, but rather to really seriously consider partial scholarships and all of what that means, whether that's a fee discount or other types of special scholarships like accommodation only, discipline specific scholarships, or even country specific scholarships. So that's something for everyone watching today to keep in mind. I will note that we're opening up for the question and answer session in one moment. So if you pop in any questions you have in the Facebook comments, if you've joined us on Facebook Live, or in the questions panel in our webinar software as well. So ask us anything that you want to know about studying in Australia and scholarships in Australia as well. So my last question for you both before we do go to the questions and answers session is around full scholarships again. So say I am lucky enough to get a full scholarship. I know I'll still need to apply for an Australian student visa. So do I still need funds in my bank account for my student visa application?
Very likely, yes.
Okay.
So the conditions for having a student visa is that a student can support themselves while they're living in Australia. If a student is lucky enough to get a full scholarship, it's highly likely that, you know, maybe they have full-time study is 20 hours a week, 25 hours a week, but they might be doing independent study for another 20, 30, 40 hours a week. So that needs to be taken into account. So if somebody is wanting to work, obviously we know that international students can study 40 hours a fortnight while they're on their student visa. But, you know, realistically, will that student have time to work? You know, study is their priority. And if they've been lucky enough to get a full scholarship, I think they really need to take that seriously. So in order to get a student visa, unless the scholarship includes, you know, a stipend for a student to study. Sometimes some of the government scholarships come with a stipend for living costs, which might cover things like your accommodation and food and bills, but it's usually very small. So, but regardless of that, a student still needs to demonstrate that they have funds in the bank in order to get a student visa, because that's demonstrating to the Australian Immigration Department that student's able to support themselves while they're living in Australia as an international student, kind of almost with the proviso that they're not working at all, because they should be able to support themselves without the need to work in many ways. So I think, that's definitely something to take into consideration.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so we will start our question and answers session now. So again, whether you've joined us on Facebook or on our webinar, ask us any questions you have about scholarships in Australia. And I'll kick off with a question from our webinar. And the question is, well, the statement is, I finished my bachelor's degree with distinction in Australia and want to study a master's degree. How likely do you think it is that I can find a full scholarship? Laurie, can you help us out with an answer for this question?
I think, it really comes back to what we've spoken about on today's webinar. It really is about doing that research and seeing what universities have. Obviously, it's probably not 100% likely that a student is going to get a full scholarship. There may be an opportunity for partial scholarships, but I think, it's really just a case of searching through, if there's a particular university that student wants to study at, it's really a case of, looking at that website. They can obviously contact the university directly, but that's really what Sophia is here to help with, that overwhelm and that confusion as well. So, if we know that a student is interested in a particular university or a particular state or city, we can navigate that and have a look at that information as well. Okay. I think, as well, we have to be mindful that, things can change. Occasionally websites are a little bit out of date. Something that's on there might not be current. And I think, that's something to be mindful of as well. So I think, obviously we have direct relationships with education providers and we can navigate some of that information. But I think probably the likelihood is, if I'm realistic without sounding mean, it's relatively limited, but there's, no reason why potentially a partial scholarship might not be possible. And of course, again, that depends on, the results and how well the student has performed in their bachelor degree.
Okay, great, thank you. And if there's any follow-up questions to our answers, please feel free to ask us those. Laurie and George are more than happy to help us out with that. So I have another question here from a student. So they say, I'm from India. Are there any university scholarships in Australia for people from India? Can you help us out with an answer to that one?
Well, I guess it comes back to, again, what we've spoken about in the webinar. So it really is on a case-by-case basis. It's possible there might be scholarships available, but we really need to go to the institution website. We need to have a look at that, see what their specifications are, and see whether that's available or not. From the outset, we couldn't say, oh yes, there's definitely a scholarship for a student from India. Unfortunately, it's not that straightforward, but certainly by navigating through some of the websites of providers, then you'll be able to come up with that information. So it's very difficult to give a very specific answer because it's a minefield. There's so much information out there. We know that they're available, but it's really looking into that. Obviously, we're not providing the scholarship, so we need to source that information. And obviously, we're aware of scholarships that are out there, but it is very much on an individual basis.
Yeah. So really what people need to be considering is having one-on-one conversations with people to find out the information specifically for them and their situation. So maybe this is a good opportunity because we've talked a lot about doing our own research online, and we know this can be complex, and we've given our viewers a few websites, a few leads that they can start by Googling. But if they do want to have that one-on-one conversation with someone about what partial scholarships they may be eligible for, can you explain a little bit about how Sophia can help? That might be a bit useful for our viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. So if again you feel like you are the type of student that could be meeting the requirements because you have a really good GPA and you're interested in areas different than business to study, so in the science, in engineering, in technology, or the humanities, do engage your Sophia education expert and express the idea that you want to apply for maybe a partial scholarship. And then that expert can actually help you with your application to a provider, be it a university or vocational provider. Bear in mind that again, you need to go through the process of applying first to the provider to then be assessed on the scholarship. That most of the time the student wants to know if they qualify for scholarship, but the reality is that only until the application happens, when the university gets to assess the application, is when the outcome of a potential scholarship will happen.
Okay, great. So just to step back again, so for those of you who aren't familiar with Sopheri, what you can do on sopheri.com is go ahead and sign up. Choose an expert in education and have a conversation with them online in an online chat room about any questions that you have about studying in Australia. And as George mentioned, they'll also help you make your application, apply for any scholarships, and even enroll. So these are your options. You can do your own online research, or you can have a conversation with someone directly online and get that information directly from them. Let them do the hard work for you. All right, so we have 2 more questions left today. So again, if anyone would like to ask any questions, pop them in Facebook or in our question and answers panel here today. All right. So we have another question here about full scholarships. And we have someone here who wants to know how many are there in Australia for international students. And we mentioned this again a little bit earlier, but let's just cover it again quickly for this person.
So yeah, as I mentioned before, so there is around about 3,000 scholarships available for Australian students, so for domestic students. So I think we can safely kind of, guess maybe there's 10% of those available for international students. It might be more, it might be less. So we're talking sort of 300 scholarships. As I said, it might be more, it might be less. In terms of full scholarships, it's probably a lot less than 300, for example. So, it's, as George spoke earlier as well, like it is for a very, very special person. Okay. And so universities are, I'm not saying the student that asked the question isn't special. I'm sure they are. But I think it's, it is for somebody who is a really, really high achieving student.
Great.
So, yeah.
And even that will not guarantee you.
No.
It's so competitive that special people compared against other special people still don't get it, right? But to give you an idea, in Australia, more than 600,000 student visas are issued every year. And we were talking about, say, 300 full scholarships. The number is very, 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 very small for the total population, right?
Yeah. Well, I have a really great follow-up question from that, actually, from someone else in our webinar, and that's around what partial scholarships are in Melbourne if I want to study business. So we're talking about partial scholarships now, and we know that partial scholarships are more available. We might not have them off the top of our heads, but maybe we can offer this person a little bit of advice today.
Yeah. I say, for instance, Swinburne University, as an example. If this student has a really good GPA on their undergrad, and let's say they're interested on doing a master's degree on an area related to business, but that is postgrad again, and this student feels like there's a good case because their undergrad results were really good, plus they have a good resume and all of that. By all means, we can engage the university even in advance to let them know, okay, this is a student that we are going to be helping. Has the merits, and then it's after applying to this provider that we will be able to understand the outcome. So the application to the master's degree need to happen first before we were able to understand if there is a partial scholarship happening or not.
Okay, great. Well, thank you to you both. That was our last question for you today. We've asked you many questions throughout the session, and thank you so much for answering them for us. I will tell everyone who's joined us on Facebook and on our webinar to stay tuned because we're going to show you how you can continue this conversation one-on-one and have a chat with an education expert rather than doing all of that research, which can get quite complex yourself. So stay tuned, but for now we'll say thank you and goodbye to Laurie and George. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. All right. So for our friends watching us here on Facebook, let's begin talking through how you can find out more about commencing a study program in Australia and possibly find the right type of scholarship for you. So here we go.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining our live video session today. What I'm going to do now is show you how to get your very own Sofiri education expert. You'll get free education counselling that is tailor-made for your situation, and you can chat about courses, universities, colleges, or whatever it is you're after from your education journey in Australia. They'll also help you make your application and even apply for a student visa if you need one. All right, here we go. So if you're not already signed up to Sofiri, head over onto sofiri.com and click sign up. Enter in the email address you'd like to use along with a password and hit the sign up button. You'll be sent an email asking you to verify that it was you who signed up with us. So all you need to do here is click through the email and you're in. Okay, so at the beginning you'll see a quick little video showing you how Sofiri works. And I do recommend giving it a watch if you have some time. Once you click on My Profile, you'll need to enter in a few of your details so our education experts can have a good idea of where to begin a conversation with you. We are HTTPS and hosted in Australia, so you can be confident that your details are 100% secure. You'll need to enter in your given name, your surname, your date of birth, your email address, your country of citizenship, your current location, and your phone number. In the additional details box, you can select your highest level of study achieved and your latest degree and language that you prefer to chat in to give your education expert a little bit more information about yourself. Once you've done this, it'll be time to choose your education expert. So you'll click on Find an Expert, and in the box here you'll enter in where you'd like to study, what discipline you'd like to study, and your intended level of study. And that's important for you to pop in there because that's information that will again be sent to your education expert so that they can have the best information possible to help inform their advice to you. So I'm having a look at the listings here and I can see that there's Laurie here with 13 years of experience. She's from Sydney, Australia, and she speaks English. So I'm going to read more about Laurie. And I can see that I'm happy with her bio and I'd like to have a chat with her directly. So I'm going to click Choose. So Laurie's online right now. I can see from that little green highlighted box next to her name. And I can expect Laurie to respond to me as soon as she's seen my message. She's got my details, so she knows a little bit about my story and will soon be able to start talking about courses and universities or colleges. Laurie will also make a study application on my behalf once I've chosen where and what I'd like to study. We can make up to 3 applications together and she'll guide me through the whole process. So this is an important piece of information for you to know, which is that all the guidance and advice and services that Laurie provides me with are completely free. So if I choose to accept my offer at a university or college, I'll pay the same course fees to them as if I'd done it myself with them directly. So Laurie is simply here to make the entire process easier for me. And that's it. So you can head on over now to sofiri.com to sign up. And again, I'd like to thank you for joining our live video session today. And if you head on over to Facebook and find this video recording, feel free to post up any more questions that you have for us about the topic we've spoken about. We're more than happy to answer you. And I hope to see you at more of our sessions in the future.